Hello, and welcome to today's tutorial. This is Odd Job Johnny, and today we're going to talk about simple soldering as you would use in wiring a stereo in a car or any other application. Here we see the tools that you need when you're doing simple soldering. We'll pan over to the left first, and then I will show you different products that you're going to want to have if you want to do good soldering jobs. So let's swish pan over that way. This here, and you'll only see my hands in this video, unfortunately, my beautiful hands. In my other videos on another channel that I have, you see my face quite regularly, but in this, just my hands. So let's move over here a little bit. This here is where I hold my soldering gun, which is over on the other side there. It's handy because you don't have to put it down on the counter and burn your workbench or whatever, but this is one thing that you definitely need to have. Now over here, I'll move this out of the way. This is regular, and I'll show it to the camera so you can see it. Very thin solder, and you can buy this. It's specifically for only electronics. So it's thin and it melts fairly good, and the coverage is very, very smooth. This here is also solder, but for doing, and I'll try and put it on the camera, it says right here, metal work. This is for doing old-fashioned tinning like they did in auto body before Bondo. I also use this because I know how to do tinning. This here is plumbing solder, and I'll pull some out. Very stiff, very thick, and this is lead-free. That's not what you need, but I just wanted to show the different types of solder and thicknesses. You want to use the thin. And I always use lead-free solder paste. Solder paste is great. Here, let's get it in front of the camera. There we go. That's lead-free solder paste. I'll talk a little more about what solder paste does and its role in soldering a good joint. And then I always use this, shrink tubing. Not electrical tape. I really don't like electrical tape. I've seen many car fires with electrical tape involved. This is almost like a butane, I guess, like lighter fluid soldering iron, and I'll show you how to use that flame versus over here. We'll pan over here. This is an actual just soldering iron is what they call that. And then I have strippers. They are wire strippers. These are about 10 or 12 bucks at Canadian Tire. I love them because before that I was stripping a lot of times with pliers, and you can take too much copper. I keep razor blades around sometimes just to peel the plastic off of the plastic covering off for wiring. In the old days, when I first got into electronics at about age 10 and was building robots and stuff, I used to use my teeth. Now my teeth always need work. It's not a good thing to use your teeth. Always have the right tools. But Odd Job Johnny says this is a majority of stuff, would you believe, that you want to have if you're going to do a car stereo. Oh, and I forgot right here, I like to have a stiff little bristle brush here to put the solder paste onto the joint. It's fairly stiff, and they're pretty cheap. You can get a pack of them at the dollar store for $1.50 or so. So right there is everything that we want to use in order to do a good solder joint. And actually, this is just wire, but this is your typical wire here that you would have for car stereo. We'll show the thickness a little better. And I'm gonna cut that, not but we're maybe gonna do it together, and you can follow along. I'll go slow enough, step by step. So let's get to setting up. I'll heat the iron up, and then I'll be back in a jiff, and we'll get started there. And we're ready to go here. My soldering iron is heated up, and that was about 6 minutes to let it heat up. I put it on the second setting so we could be a little quicker here. So let's get right to it. Of course, here's a soldering iron right here, and it's plugged in and it's in a nice holder. So well, we call this in the movie industry swish pan, because I did work in the movie industry for many years. So let's get these. These are the clippers. Well, they're the wire strippers. So what we do with those is, here, let's get some light on things so you guys can actually all see here. Let's try and get the light to come on here. Apparently not. Okay. Well, so what you do is, if you can see, hopefully it's not too dark, you put it in the strippers like that, and a quick, and I'll show the camera. I'm going to try and do this as best as I can, step by step. There's how much it took off, and then I just kind of pull it off. So you got like this fray here, a little bit of, if you can see it now. Let's do that one, and I'll do another one. And so I'll do it for the camera. There, we got some light. There we go. See how much easier that is? Better than using my teeth. If I could go back and tell 10-year-old Johnny, I'd be like, get some strippers, buddy. Okay, here we go. So here's some good close-up. There's two things here. What I like to do is get these together so they're kind of hanging outside, and I like to twist that joint together. I didn't say joint because I was referring to anything else. I was talking about a solder joint here for everybody who's thinking the wrong thing. Okay, there we go. Okay, next we're gonna move on to something else as far as soldering goes, and that's the prep and the pre-step. So hang tight for a second here, and now I'm gonna set some other stuff up. Hey, here we go. So here's the solder, the joint that we're gonna solder together. We got it twisted nice. You can really see, because I've got some more light on now on the camera so we can see that joint. Here's the brush, and this is step by step, so hopefully you can follow along. We got the solder paste. Solder paste, like I said, I'd explain it. Solder paste sucks solder into a joint, so there's no big glob. It's super smooth. I like to use a bit. Sometimes I use a lot. Like, you can never use too much because you want a good solder joint. I won't say joint. I'll say solder joint. And let me tell you, while I'm doing this, that I love to have a clean work area. I started being a mechanic at 17 out of school on Porsche and Jags and stuff like that. And I learned from a guy that keeping a nice clean workspace is super easy, and it prevents fire. I've seen some fires in shops and things like that. Okay, that's enough of that. Let's get on with it. So what we're gonna do is, and it's a little bit difficult for me to work with just, one hand. So I'm gonna use this because it's easier for me. Then I can show you. So I have an alligator clip on there. That's so handy. Then I have a third hand. This is something I didn't mention. This is just simple alligator clips. You don't have to do it fancy like this. This is kind of what I use for testing circuits and stuff. But what I like to do is when I'm soldering, you've got a joint here and here. So if you've already got this going to a component, like say into the back of a stereo already or something, you don't want heat traveling down the wire. What is copper? Copper is a fantastic conductor. It conducts extremely well. Heat travels extremely fast. It can go up and melt some component further up. What I do is I use this. This is called heat sink. Heat sink is where I'll put this onto here, so kind of away from the solder joint, and it's copper, and it's right there. Let's move the soldering iron out here. And what we do is, when we're soldering, so here's solder iron, very hot, of course, burned myself a few times. This is a heat sink, so as I am soldering this, the heat goes up here, but wait, it stops right here and goes down here and down this wire. This wire doesn't matter to me because I don't use it for a whole lot of things, mostly heat sinking. So what you want to do is, you get on the other side of the solder joint and see this, and I don't know if you can see smoke on camera, but that's sizzling. That there is the sizzling of the flux. And so what you do is you put it on there, and then you just touch it, and the solder goes right into the joint, and then you heat a little more. Listen to that flux sucking that in. Beautiful. What a great little solder joint there, Odd Job Johnny. Well, thank you. So here we are. So that's a little hot. That took some heat, but it didn't travel all the way up the wire. The wire is nice and cool because it came up and went down the heat sink. If you didn't have that and you're kind of monkeying around and you're not sure about soldering, it can melt this casing, and then down the line you have an electrical problem in your car. Let me show you this solder joint and how beautiful it is. And like I said to myself, well done, Johnny. Look at how nice that is. Very smooth, no big glob, no nothing. So next thing we're gonna do I'm not going to turn the camera off, is I'm going to take this and put it on here on top of that solder joint, and then that there covers your solder joint. But what you have to do is, let's get some of that flux out of the way, you take a lighter and you just put the flame under there, and that shrinks down, and I'll do it in the next solder joint because I want to do one with a torch. It shrinks down and goes tight against there, just about the size of this casing. So when you're looming wire, and looming wire means that you're pulling it through somewhere. If you're doing a hot rod or something, you're pulling it and it can get caught on an edge, electrical tape can peel back and then it can short to ground on the body if you're pulling wire for a long period of time down a chassis. But shrink tube never comes off. It's bulletproof. It's a little pricey, but it's absolutely worth it to not see your hot rod burn up or your motorbike. I've also worked on motorbikes for about 14 years, and I've seen a lot of different electrical problems with bad solder joints. So let's go on to using a flame and using it to solder, and I'll do that step by step. Hope this was a great little tutorial on using a soldering iron, which is right here, and using solder flux and using solder. So there we go, the step by step for everybody at home that likes to do it yourself like Odd Job Johnny does.